Welcome to 2D6 Friday, number 18. Maybe 17 were quite spectacular. I think we're going to top them all tonight. Bum, 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 bum. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 2D6 Friday. I'm very orange here. Always pass for just a floating head, I think. Now, ordinarily, this show is just non-stop organisation and professionalism at its finest. However, tonight I have been grappling with one or two technical gremlins. Gremlin wrestling, if you will. And although I was able to lock one or two of those gremlins into unbreakable submission holds, a couple of them just wouldn't go down. One of them kind of skirting around the outside of the ring, just dancing just out of reach. The old jab. Can't quite grapple with them. Someone says that it's completely silent. Well, let's try and fix that, shall we? And there's a very good reason for this. Let's see. There we go. And how about now? Can everybody hear me now? How about now? Let's wait for the old comments to roll in, see if people can actually hear me. If they can, that will be greatly pleasing. There is a perfectly good explanation for the lack of audio. Oh, there we go, we've got a yay, so I'm assuming it works. Right then. So, normally this show is nothing but wall-to-wall professionalism and hours of preparation, painstaking preparation going to each show. However, oh, the sound isn't very good now, apparently. Let's try switching to the webcam microphone, see how that goes. Okay, how about now, folks? How's that for audio quality? There will be a perfectly good explanation for all this very shortly, by the way. Is it better now? I'll assume it is and just keep rolling. So, ladies and gentlemen, in case you didn't hear anything that I previously said, welcome to 2D6 Friday, number 18. The previous 17 were spectacular. This will be no different. However, there were one or two technical gremlins that I was forced to grapple with. I applied unbreakable submission holds to one or two of those gremlins, but there are a couple kind of skirting around the edge of the ring, just out of range of the old jab, so I haven't been able to grapple successfully with all of them. And what it boils down to is that my usual PC decided to literally soil itself only hours before the show. And by that I mean brown screen of death. I've never experienced the old brown screen of death before, but I was just quite happily feverishly browsing away on the internet, doing all my usual pre-show research and all the usual shenanigans. But then, phew, sound gone, brown screen of death, no text at all, completely gone. So I thought, it's probably one of those random one-off technical glitches that pop up now and then. So I'll just have to land the old right hook to the technical gremlin, and holding down the old off button on the PC did the trick, turned it off. However, when I went to turn it back on again, no response. So I'm thinking that the PC, which is now seated over there instead of down here, the power supply seems to have fried itself somehow, which is most unfortunate. And of course, you can't just go switching around power supplies willy-nilly if they're not compatible with each other. So I can't just sit power supply from my old PC into the new PC and expect it not to completely blow up. So I'm going to have to get in touch with the people that sold me that faulty piece of hardware and see if we can get that figured out. So for tonight, I've had to revert back to the old PC, which is why it reset all my old audio settings and put it to like half microphone volume and all those other silly things that it did, because that's what happens when you unplug audio and video devices. It stops recognizing them until you can reprogram all the settings that you had previously. So let's see who's in the audience, shall we? Because it's quite packed, actually. 20 viewers at the moment. Let's see who we've got in there. We've got the likes of Bazooka J Rambo, Demon _ Lizard _ from _ outer _ space, Dice Miniature Paint Guy, Fernando Vortex. Fernando Vortex, that is an interesting name. It sounds like some kind of space traveller, doesn't it? We've got Gloom Dready Gaming, Mark Harvey, Mickey Genva, Auric Lovegod, Rural Goblin, not to be confused with his city-dwelling cousin, who is also a goblin. We've got Wraith13, we've got Sean Blake has just popped in. Fernando Vortex is very pleased that he sounds like a space traveller. Yeah, it sounds like somebody that maybe not necessarily Star Wars, because Star Wars characters always have very, very silly names, don't they? So, not quite Star Wars. If anyone can suggest a sci-fi universe that Fernando Vortex would fit into, then let me know. Bazooka J Rambo talking about a robot costume. Yes, I've seen some of that on Facebook actually. The old Bazooka J seems to be working on a robot for a short film, and Mickey Genbo was suggesting that maybe his robot girlfriend, I think, or did someone else suggest that? But anyway, I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it doesn't double as his life companion. I'm sure it is just a film prop. Grackham has popped up there in the old chat. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have quite a few juicy topics to sink our fangs into. They're not going to be sank quite as deeply as they possibly could have been due to the technical issues. Oh, Walk81 is in here as well and thinks that Fernando Vortex would fit in nicely with Guardians of the Galaxy. Auric Lovegod thinks Buck Rogers. And apparently Fernando Vortex is from Brazil. Quite alien-like place, apparently, according to him. Well, I'll take your word for it because I've never been to Brazil. So, there are some things we're going to look at immediately. So, something that's been on everybody's lips this week is, of course, this beastie. So, GW they've taken a slightly different approach to dealing with leaks. And in around about the same time they put out their video randomly leaking various plastic sprues coming up in the future, this guy popped up as well. This is apparently Magnus the Red. Now, I know nothing about the fluff surrounding this guy, but I'm pretty sure is a 40k, some kind of Zench demon prince of some description. And as you can see, he's got very, very fine ornate armor with gigantic horn nipples. Yes, that's the only place he has the horns. If it was Slanesh, then I can think of a few places, a few options for where you might like to place the third armor horn. Maybe the fifth, technically, because he already has a couple of mighty horns on his helmet as well. And a strange ornamental thing on his weapon there. Very, very strange looking. A few people have already said they're going to be converting them into greater demons. If anyone has any more info on this guy, other than the fact that he has super horn nipples, then feel free to let me know, because I'm no expert when it comes to the 40k backstory. He looks pretty interesting, though. And the other things that were rumoured, I don't suppose you can say rumoured now, kind of confirmed. Some more Zenchian 40k stuff is going to be coming out in plastic. And then right at the end of that leak video that GW put out, they mentioned plastic Sisters of Battle. Plastic Sisters of Battle indeed. Sisters of Battle have always been one of those armies that are obscenely expensive to collect and to get into. Kind of like all the armies used to be in the old days until they came out with the various plastic boxes, although prices in general were slightly lower back then anyway. So it wouldn't have been quite as obscene. To get into Sisters of Battle now, I don't know how ridiculous a fee you would have to pay to get a full army of, say, 2,000 points to put on the table. But I imagine that the very thought, as soon as you start browsing and clicking the old add to cart button, your wallet would literally try and leap out of your pocket and exit your home never to return. So it would be quite obscene. If they're in plastic, some people don't believe they're going to be releasing them, actually. For example, in the chat here, Dreddy says, I would be surprised if they released Plastic Sisters. I think they just trolled. Now, that would be a first if GW were actually trolling people, other than their occasional April Fool's Day pranks, as it were. But if that's the way they're going to go, and we can no longer trust any rumours because they could just be GW pulling our chains, if you will, that would be an interesting way to deal with the leaks, if they just put out the most ridiculous rumours possible. So in the end, people just stop believing everything they hear. And the only way they know it's confirmed is when they see it on that GW front page. It's not something I'd considered as a strategy for them to deal with the leaks, but I think that could be quite effective, actually. I would lean towards them actually releasing Plastic Sisters of Battle at some point, though. I wouldn't be surprised at all. If anyone in the old chat has got any examples of armies that they spent a ridiculous amount of money on because of the lack of availability, or the fact that the models were only available in metal, for instance, then let me know. Oh, we've got a couple more people have popped into the old chat. We've got MC1 Gamer and Graham Collin, who we haven't seen in here for a while. Basic 10-person Battle Sisters squad is currently £50. £50. £5 per miniature. That's quite a significant sum to be shelling out on what are essentially regular Space Marines, or I believe they're even less potent on the battlefield than a regular Space Marine as far as the rules go. So, interesting. Dice Miniature Paint Guy apparently put a lot of money into his Chaos Dwarves. If they're the old classic Chaos Dwarves, then I could see how that would be very, very expensive. Or if they're the Forge World Chaos Dwarves. As a matter of fact, anyone doing Chaos Dwarves, unless you go for the much cheaper Mantic or some of the other companies out there that have got very cheap or cheaper Chaos Dwarves, or Chaotic Dwarves, or Evil or Abyssal Dwarves, whatever word they tag in there, instead of Chaos, just to make sure they're not going to get sued. MC1 Gamer spent a ton on Hexwraith Questing Knight conversions, combining undead and Bretonnian plastic kits, because the metal bits are hella expensive. Are we using the word hella now? Is that how it's going to be, Mr. MC1 Gamer? I want 15 and don't want to spend 150 bucks on them. Dice Miniature Paint Guy, Forge World Chaos Dwarves, apparently. That might be even more expensive than going for the old school metal ones on eBay, actually. I'm not sure, I haven't looked up those lately. I did see a decent sized army of old metal Chaos Dwarves pop up on one of the Facebook trading groups a while ago. MC1 Gamer, the Metal Questing Knights are crazy. Are we saying cray as well? It was hella cray, MC1, I'm led to believe. Mickey Jennifer, the Metal Plague Bearers were so cool, though the plastic not so good. Yeah, there are a few examples of models that were really ultra sweet in metal and then weren't quite so impressive when they turned to plastic, particularly during the days of the old single pose plastic, when they first discovered how to do a big sprue of plastic and not have to individually produce all those metal blister packs. For example, the old single pose dwarves that are all holding their axe kind of like this, and the old single pose goth orcs for 40k that were kind of holding their axes like this. You're noticing a theme here. Most of the models seem to be holding their weapon kind of like this, very flat to their body. Or you would have kind of Space Marine captains that were like in metal, they'd be like this. And then when you got them in plastic, they were kind of flat and squashed up like that. So the trend for the metal ones was to be kind of flat, but they could be wider. And then with plastic, they were kind of a little bit more in the old 3D because they had the separate arms for the most part, but they were kind of squashed, I thought. I don't know whether they were just trying to fit more of them onto a sprue or what, but if you think of the old Space Marines and compare them to now, the old Space Marines that were kind of like this, and now they're much more proud and holding their guns in front of them. Let's see. Oracle of God, though, different size too when they went from metal to plastic. A lot of miniatures have gone through drastic size alterations over the years, certainly. MC1 Gamer, ultra sweet. I like it. You have to emphasize sweet, though. Sweet! Dreddy says, I love my metal plague bearers, but I also like the new plastic ones. Actually, wish I had more, just because bringing a full case of metal minis to a game is inconvenient. Yes, it is. If I ever have to travel anywhere, with my bolt-action Belgian army. It would give me a decent arm workout, I think. It would also give me a nice super glue workout when I got there, probably, because there are a few pieces that would most likely fall off. Although many of the infantry are just one piece, so probably not them, but some of the weapon teams, I can imagine, would fall apart when I got to the event or the location that I was travelling to. I did actually very cleverly with one of my Belgian weapon teams, though, strategically engineer my gluing positions and the positions of the crew on the base, so that if it falls off the table, the point of impact is going to be the top of one guy's head, and I haven't put any kind of extra join on his neck, so his head is just going to pop off and absorb all that impact. And that did actually happen once, and the only part that came off was his head, so success. If you glue all the parts too firmly, then it'll kind of rattle around and crash as it hits the ground, I feel. You have to build a weakness in there, because it's always going to follow the path of least resistance, that old shock coursing through the metal miniature. If I'm completely scientifically off on that, someone feel free to let me know. Oracle of God says, chicks dig muscles. Yes, they do. And as you can tell, I am some kind of ultimate muscle beast. I'm not going to take off the shirt because I don't want people to get too excited. But look at that. That is pure sculpted muscle underneath there. Listen to it. That is the sound of beast. Let's see. MC1 Gamer. Metal minis were how I kept in shape. After the move to plastic, I've gotten soft and fat. Curse you, plastic minis. Well, I wouldn't like to comment on Mr. MC1 Gamer's physique. Oracle of God, your microphone is popping. Mic distortion is back a bit. What? Right, let's try switching to something else again. Let's try switching to... Right, let's go back to the other microphone that's dodgy. Okay, if it temporarily comes back and then disappears again, I'll have to apologise. People complaining of distortion. And apparently it was just a hangout being stupid and temporarily turning me into a robot. Yeah, I was expecting a few technical hiccups since I'm not on the usual PC right now. Let me know if the audio has gone back to normal before I break into the next talking point. And if it hasn't, then I will make further adjustments, which could include restarting the Hangout. Because the Hangouts are actually somewhat clever now. If you accidentally close down the Hangout, it doesn't just end the broadcast. It just temporarily puts it on hold until you come back. Unless you actually click the old stop broadcast button. Apparently the audio is fine. Although Oracle of God thinks I work for Skynet. As some kind of robot. No. Although Bazooka J. Rambo and his robot girlfriend, maybe, they've got some experience in the robot voice department, so they could possibly comment on this issue. Let's see. MC1 Gamer thinks I was using my awesome voice synthesizer for when I do my DJing on the side. No, you got it all wrong. I'm not a DJ. I am actually a controversial rap artist. Okay, all the sound is good. So let's move on, shall we? Because I did put the word out on Facebook that I was looking for some potential questions for this episode, since the old question and a Q&A section was such a huge hit last week, and there were a few responses, and this screen share that's coming up is related to one of them. So before we get to the question, first of all, this kind of leads into the question first. Okay, so we have seen the signs of some Blood Bowl teams here. These are the Skaven Blight Scramblers. And you can see that a couple of them have balls wrapped up in their tails. Yeah, so I'd be interested to see what everyone thinks of the new Blood Bowl miniatures, because they're not really Age of Sigmarified in the least. They're not even End Times, as far as I can tell. They're very much in the old Warhammer Fantasy style, which shows that that style of miniature is not going to be completely dead. I would like to see what the audience think about these, because I think they look pretty sweet, actually. I like the poses. They're quite dynamic, but not too dynamic. Every single guy isn't on his tiptoes, leaning off the edge of his base with his tail kind of all over the place. they are fairly compact. Because if you think about it, with this being a grid-based board game, you don't want the miniatures overlapping too much into other squares, because they are going to start poking each other in the face, and it's going to be a big fat mess. And they're going to be nudging each other off onto different squares, and it'll be a nightmare. So the fact that their tails are swirling around a bit, but for the most part they're contained to some kind of cube. If you imagine a kind of a cylinder coming up around the base, then most of the model is contained within that. There's only a tiny bit encroaching off the edge. Skeleton Flower says, these are my favourite models that they have done in several years. Dreddy says, I think Blood Bowl always existed in its own little pseudo old world pocket universe, so it makes sense that they kept the style. Yeah, that does make perfect sense to me. Although I'm sure when people heard Blood Bowl was coming back, the first thoughts were, oh god, no, they're going to put a Stormcast team in the starter box and people are going to completely flip. But no, it's still humans and orcs from what I can tell, and now we've got the Skaven Blight Scramblers. Let's see. Lots of people like the models. Demon_lizard_from_outer_space loves the models. Who else has shown some delight at the sight of these wondrous creations? Dice Miniature Paint Guy, this and Guild Ball are going to have my monies. Yeah, a lot of people seem to be jumping on the old Guild Ball bandwagon. I'd be interested to see how it does when Blood Bowl hits. Whether all the Guild Ball players jump to Blood Bowl instantly. I would say that I'm also wondering what would happen to Dread Ball, except not a whole lot seems to be happening to the Dread Ball community at the moment, although of course they have got the version 2 of Dread Ball, which will be coming at some point. But for now, there isn't too much going on in the world of Dread Ball as we wait for version 2. So it looks like Blood Bowl is going to reign supreme, probably. A couple of people talking about halflings possibly popping up in Blood Bowl. Yeah, if halflings still survive, it would be within the Blood Bowl realm, definitely. That would be one place that they could still thrive, I imagine. The one place that the old world aesthetic lives. Although, of course, it was kind of a bizarro old world aesthetic. There were tweaks to it that you wouldn't really see in the slightly more serious games that they did. Blood Bowl was always a little bit zanier and wasn't really supposed to fit in with everything, particularly. Let's see, Graham Collin should still have a brand new old school Chaos Dwarves Blood Bowl team in the garage somewhere. Not sure the box ever got opened. Well, now might be a time to dust that bad boy off. If they actually released a Chaos Dwarf team in the old style, that would be pretty interesting. Very interesting indeed, actually. Mickey Gender, will there be Hamster Ball as a Cheeks spin-off? Well, you never know, and of course you can see the word Cheeks up there at the top of the page, which suggests we're going to be looking at that very shortly. So, the question that I received is related to this next image, which appears to be a dwarf Blood Bowl team, and the question was, it's kind of Age of Sigmar related, even though this is the 2D6 Friday show, which is generally an Age of Sigmar free zone, but it's Blood Bowl related as well. And the question was, is this probably the way the dwarf aesthetic is going to head in Age of Sigmar? And I would say definitely not. Because if all of these Blood Bowl teams are representative of the old world style, then I don't think they would kind of use these as a precursor to the new aesthetic for an army. I think this is going to be something completely one-off and old school and not at all related to the existing ranges. That would be my thoughts on that. There's some pretty tasty beard action going on here, and that guy is actually launching himself up by the power of his beard. His beard is the only thing touching the base. I'm not sure whether GW have ever done that before, a beard being the only contact point. But it's a bold move. As far as these guys go, the poses, they look a little bit more tiptoey like than the Skaven. This guy here, there's a couple at the back that just seem to have a toe onto the base. I'm generally a fan of bigger contact points, but with these plastics, they usually, even if you chuck them against the wall, these GW plastics, they're not going to break. So I would say it should be fine. Let's see. People seem to like these. Rural Goblin is a big fan of these dwarves. Beard Power. Beard Bearings. Graham Rig. Hamster balls get stuck under the sofa. I'm sure they do. Although there is nothing more comical than watching a hamster ride around, scratching away on its ball. MC1 Gamer just wanted to say hi, show some support, and now has to go. Well, that's no good, is it? I even started half an hour early this week, and you still can't stick around. What a loser. Okay, it's time to look at something else. Before we go on to potentially more questions, let's have a look at Cheeks, shall we? Because this is quite a big week for Cheeks. We're looking at the update here, and the pledge manager has actually gone out by email now. And for anyone out there who's received the Cheeks pledge manager, keep in mind that the technical wizards that put together the pledge manager seem to have set it in a way it can't be taken back. It's going to be set like this forever. You have to answer every single question. So there's a couple of parts where it will say, would you like to add such and such to your pledge? And if you hit no, then there'll be another question underneath that says, if you selected yes, what color would you like your item? So if you select no, you still have to pick a color for the item that doesn't exist to allow you to proceed. And that's just a slight issue with the pledge manager, which doesn't really affect anything. It's just a mild inconvenience to wrap your head around it, that you still have to answer every single question. And there's one part that says, how many extra packs would you like? And there isn't actually an option for 0. So you just have to put in more, which is the only one that isn't a number. And then at the bottom, you just put no or nothing or not applicable. So it's fairly self-explanatory, but it's not the easiest at first glance. But we are going to have a look at all the artwork, the new artwork that was never revealed during the campaign, the artwork for the characters, because these are the particular pieces that you can put onto the t-shirts and the bags and so on. And here, of course, is Andy the A-lister. Look at that. This is the guy I'm definitely going to get on a t-shirt for obvious reasons. Then we've got Bubbles the baby. Now, Andy the A-lister and Bubbles the baby are two of the characters that backers came up with or conspired to come up with. Then we've got Larry the lawyer, dollar signs in his eyes. No win, no fee. Is he that kind of lawyer? I don't know. He looks like he's going to be taking a fee whether he wins or not. He's got a dollar sign on his belt buckle and on his tie. He seems to be all about the money. I don't think he's going to be too charitable. Then this was also collaborated with a backer to create this one, and this is Rem the Rockstar. Very strong resemblance to Mr. Remington Steele, of course. Then, now this guy wasn't even supposed to be included, but the artist seemed to take it upon himself to actually do this piece of art regardless. It wasn't actually unlocked during the campaign. We actually finished a few pounds short of unlocking him, but the artist decided to do it anyway. This is Hamstar the Ham Droid. So he is in there for all the people that were excited about seeing this guy and then were gravely disappointed that we didn't make the last £50 or whatever it was to unlock this guy. Then Tina the Trucker. Judy the Judge, spelt with an I, of course, so there won't be any lawsuits forthcoming, holding a copy of the Cheeks rulebook there. Although, oddly enough, it seems to say Cheeks rulebook on the back. So maybe it says it on the front as well. Maybe that's the excuse. And the gavel there, of course, and the wig and the glasses. And you can tell that Judy is female because there seems to be a slight amount of reddening around the lips there, which I would suggest is probably lipstick. So there isn't an obvious way to tell the gender of a hamster by eyesight, but of course they are ever so slightly anthropomorphized, these characters. And I think that's the loss of them. And that someone in the old comments there on the Kickstarter page was asking how to proceed. because you have to answer every single question. So yeah, very, very exciting times. You can see all the characters here, and I just submitted the final corrections on the card text for all the various cards. So the text has been added to them, so the next stage is going to be to send them off to the printers. So there were a couple of last minute things that I had to get altered. There were a couple of spelling mistakes which I demanded that I would personally check before it went to the printers, because I have a good eye for that sort of thing, and it would drive me nuts if a game was out there with my name on it and there was one mistake in it. I'm sure there's probably one that's escaped my sight as well. Maybe there's a full stop in the wrong place, or a comma that should be something else. But you can't catch absolutely everything, can you? Look at that. I don't remember actually having orange eyes, but if I was going to wear contact lenses, I think they would certainly be orange. It's very, very exciting though. And all the rules were sent off for German translation as well recently. So I think we can stop the old screen share now. So it's looking as though Cheeks is going to be in people's hands. People are going to be able to wrap their mitts firmly around my cheeks in time for Christmas. It's looking that way at the moment, barring any unforeseen delays that may come up. For example, some kind of explosion, because there's just too much juicy, cheeky goodness in the printing factory or print works, and it just too much awesomeness in there for it to contain. Or maybe there'll be some kind of horrific road accident involving the van that's transporting all the cards to some kind of distribution center, and the driver will just be decapitated by a falling tree or something, and all the cards will fall into a river and they'll all be completely ruined, and we'll have to do the whole print run again. But barring anything like that, maybe some of the packs of cards will become haunted with a ghost that haunts the printing works, and those packs will kind of cause a poltergeist to inhabit the distribution center, and it'll scare off all the workers, so no one will be able to send the cards off to their rightful owners. Yeah, we could have any various issues. Oh, apparently the audio issue is back, and then it's gone again. Yes. So I'm sure it is because I've had to fiddle with my audio settings in the Hangout after, at the last minute, hooking up the other PC after the preferred PC, the PC over there, which is much quieter as well, decided to fry its own power supply, which I'm going to have to get resolved very soon. Mickey Jenver, what if Duncan releases a hamster card game next week? If Duncan makes a hamster painting tutorial, I'll be mildly suspicious. Although, I would assume he wouldn't release a hamster card game, since that doesn't seem to be his domain, but GW could release a hamster card game quite easily. I suppose, if they really wanted to, they could release any kind of hamster-themed game, couldn't they, really? Coordinate hamsters, Nurgle hamsters, perhaps? A Nurgle hamster dueling game. I could definitely see that. I don't think GW have a history of putting any kind of hamster-related content into their games, though, so I'm not overly concerned. Let's see. Did anyone else have anything to say about Cheeks? You could still add a Jeff card, just a blank background because he didn't turn up. I certainly could. I do have to actually write one more card, I think, to be a kind of limited special edition card that will be given away at events and so on. And I'm also putting together some plans for possibly going to Salute at the start of next year, where I would be demoing Cheeks alongside all the people from WordForge Games in my Cheeks t-shirt, and then wandering around the event kind of handing out promotional Cheeks cards and telling everyone how amazing Cheeks is and that they should wander over and get the demo game. And then as they're wandering over, I'll kind of sprint round the other way around the venue and be seated at the table with a fake mustache on so they don't realise it's the same person. Let's see, Sean Blake, Wizards of the Coast could do a Cheeks-like game. They could do a kind of Cheeks role-playing game. I'm sure they could. Graham Collin, Slaneshi hamsters. Yeah, I'm sure you could have hamsters after all of the various Chaos Gods. Dreddy says, maybe Jeff snuck into my PC. Yes, that is actually entirely possible. If Jeff snuck in there, that seems to be the kind of thing that would happen. Because it's one of the most annoying things that can happen to a PC, the power supply going out, I think, because it's kind of connected to so many other things that there's going to be a lot of unplugging. And you know the inside of PC is generally quite congested and it's difficult because you'll attach things and then slot things in a way that kind of blocks your finger access to those points. So you kind of have to remove a few parts. It's not as annoying as the motherboard going. That would be the worst possible thing because then you have to kind of disconnect every single piece and reattach everything. But the power supply isn't too far behind. It's attached to virtually everything inside there, so that's going to be annoying to replace. And apparently the mic is going crazy fuzzy again. Oh dear, oh dear. Well, I don't think we're going to be going on to a full-length show tonight anyway, because of the technical issues. I had to spend so long figuring out the review piece of preparation for the show that I weren't able to do, which would have been nice to extend the length of it. But if the audio is still alright, then we have got a couple more things to touch on before we go. I was actually thinking about cancelling the show, considering the PC situation, but I thought, you know what? That's not me. I'm too dedicated to my audience. Even that one time I had to miss the Andy and Rome show, I did make sure that replacement hosts were lined up. So I'm going to have a look. Actually, there's a couple of things that aren't related to questions that I can touch on. So, the Andy and Rem Battle Report Patreon is going to change because the old Remster, his circumstances have changed a little bit, so he's not going to be able to travel as much for the game recording, so we wouldn't be able to make them on a reliable, consistent basis. So it would be wrong to take money off people and possibly not get a video up in the allocated time frame. So there would still be Age of Sigmar battle reports, but not necessarily on time. So it would be wrong to continue taking people's money for those when they're not going to be regularly scheduled, if you will. So I'm going to change the Patreon campaign into more of a kind of general channel support campaign, and I've announced this to the patrons already. So those people that are purely there for Age of Sigmar Battle Report content and just don't want to support the rest of the channel can easily take their backing out. And then it may draw some other people in there as well, because there are people that watch this channel that don't actually care about Age of Sigmar at all, some of whom probably watch this show. There's quite a few Kings of War fans, for example, that watch the channel and might be interested in contributing to the grade A content that this channel spews forth on a regular basis. So look forward to some tweaking going on with that at some point soon. Apparently Rem has a girlfriend that is a rock, according to Dreddy and Auric Love God. What is with people entering into relationships with inanimate objects tonight? Very strange indeed. Okay, now another thing that I wanted to touch on, because someone was asking me about this topic, and it's kind of related to Patreon as well. So, the title of the video had YouTube responsibilities in it, and someone was saying that sounds very serious, and it is fairly serious. So, the question is, how do people feel when their favourite YouTube channels just suddenly stop producing content? Do you feel betrayed? Do you feel like, well, that's just part of life sometimes? Things get in the way and you just have to disappear without a trace for a year sometimes, or 2 years, or 3 years, or 5 years. If they then come back out of nowhere, and if they maybe don't even apologise and just carry on like nothing happened, are you the kind of audience member who would just be grateful that they're back and just continue to support them? Or are you the kind of person that would think, actually, you know, I had built an emotional bond with you and your channel over these years that I watched your videos, and I kind of feel a bit let down that you would just disappear without a trace, without even a single word? Do you feel like people should let you know when they're going to be taking extended absences? Do you feel like once they're part way into an unintentional extended absence, they should at the very least put up a small video explaining to you what's going on? Does it change anything if you've actually put money in? If you've been a backer, or if you've bought merchandise from that channel, does that change how you would feel about it? If someone takes a huge wad of your money and then disappears, would that change things? Before I go on, let's have a look what people are saying in the comments. So, or look, there are enough YouTubers and Twitch guys out there to keep me busy. That's kind of how I feel about it, but in general, I tend to watch the same few channels a lot, rather than watching a huge amount of channels. I usually just watch a very select handful at any given time. Occasionally, one will drop out of my interest and another one will come in. But I used to be subscribed to about 400 channels on YouTube, I think, and I've got it down to about 50. So that should tell you something. There were just a ton that I had no intention of watching. So this came up because there were a couple of channels, one of them not even wargaming related, that took extended absences and then kind of came back and barely acknowledged the fact they'd been gone and just kind of tried to slot back in to the groove they were in before they left, and didn't really offer any apology to the audience. And for the most part, people kind of welcomed them back with open arms. And see, Super Jerome saying some channels do say have put up a goodbye video. Yeah, when people do that, that's one thing. That's different from what I'm talking about, which is just completely disappearing without any kind of warning. Apparently the static is staying this time. Well, we are on the webcam mic right now, actually. So let's try switching. Does this mean you are stopping? Oh, face. No, it does not. It's just an interesting thing to think about, because I do have another YouTube channel. I have tons of other YouTube channels where I just don't put up content anymore, and I didn't really announce I was leaving particularly, and I used to put up regular content on those channels. And one of my channels in particular, I usually put up one video per year, just a really short one, just to kind of show everyone I'm still alive, because I do find that kind of frustrating when a channel will disappear and then won't ever kind of come back. They've just completely cut themselves off from it when there were people that built that connection with them. And I think sometimes people underestimate the connection that you can have with an audience through the power of the old YouTubes. And occasionally you get the impression when people just completely disappear, especially if they were involved in some kind of business. This has happened in the war games community, not so much on YouTube, but kind of on YouTube, because one of the companies in particular did have a YouTube channel. But the company will get a lot of people's money into their business, and then they'll just completely disappear without a trace. And you can understand why they've done it, because they're probably ripping people off, or they just want to disappear without paying people what they're owed, and so on. So when I say you can understand why they've done it, you know why they've done it, but you can't really, you may not be able to attune yourself to that mental frequency to kind of get into the mindset of someone that would do things like that, but you know why they have done it, really. So let's see what are people saying. So is the microphone great now? I switched back to the good microphone, which was acting up earlier and being all fuzzy. So hopefully it's fine now. Let's see. Wasgob. Andy was last seen clambering up the helicopter steps with a briefcase, leaking £50 notes after his Cheeks endeavour. Yes, and oddly enough, funny you mentioned that, I have actually received my first Cheeks-related payment, actually. I'm not sure I'm contractually allowed to tell you exactly how much it is. I would have to look into that, but it's not a significant amount, because of course it didn't exactly fund in the millions, which would have made me a significant sum. It was Gob. I was most perturbed by the disappearance of the gentleman gamer. Now, I'm going to assume, of course, you're saying this on my channel, you must surely be referring to my other YouTube channel, where I would review PC games in a monocle and a top hat. Although I know for a fact there are lots of YouTube channels that do kind of a similar gimmick, if you will. Although, quite frankly, I think I did it better than them. And the only reason I moved away from that channel was because I didn't really like the level of interaction with the community compared to wargaming. Wargaming's much more interactive with the people, because it's a kind of a more niche, intimate hobby. You have more of a connection with people. You're more likely to meet the people that you interact with online compared to PC games, for instance, where it's all very kind of solo. Even if you play it multiplayer, often people will just refer to you by your username all the time and barely even get to know you sometimes. Even people you've been playing games with for a long time online. That's what I found when I was playing in either clans or whatever the particular game I was playing referred to them as. Let's see. Dice Miniature Paint Guy. A lot of channels gone. Some did what you described, trying not to name names now. Yes, there are certainly channels or businesses in general that have gone on a bit of a cash grab and then vanished into thin air because maybe they didn't actually have passion for whatever it was they were focused on in their videos. Maybe they just saw a business opportunity, either grabbed it and left, or realised it wasn't actually that lucrative and left because they didn't really have that much passion for it. Dinotyne Edition is talking about someone whose health was an issue. I didn't see who he was talking about though. Yeah, there are always reasons that people can disappear. If a YouTuber dropped dead, I wouldn't expect them to make an update video. I wouldn't expect a video a year later saying, yep, I'm somewhat decomposed now, or yep, my ashes are still just chilling out in this urn. If someone is actually gravely ill, I wouldn't really expect them to put up an update, although I can't think of an illness I would be suffering from that would prevent me from, at the very least, getting someone to pass on a message for me, even if it's just, tell my audience I'm ill. Something as simple as that. So, yeah, maybe that's just me though. I'm sure there are people out there that as soon as they get a bit of a cold, would just abandon their YouTube following. I just played the game of, is that a bit of food or dirt? It was food, a piece of orange. Did you eat it to find out whether it was food or dirt? Or did you examine it thoroughly? That's slightly off topic though, isn't it? Let's see. Wozgob, any YouTuber worth their salt would make it, if you're watching this, then I'm dead video. Actually, I have actually thought if I'm ever diagnosed with any kind of terminal illness, I'm going to make a ton of videos and kind of space out the release of them, kind of schedule them to pop up like every couple of months. So for the next couple of years, there would actually be video content of me from beyond the grave. That is actually my plan. Of course, if I'm just hit by a bus tomorrow, then it's not quite as easy to plan for things like that. But if you know you're going to die, then for me at least, I would prepare for that. I don't know whether it would just completely spook people out if a year later a video popped up with me being very much alive and on camera. But I think I would have to put something in the description, like, or in the title, I'm still dead. Something like that. Let's see, Dice Miniature Paint Guy, is that actually a fine thing to do? What's he talking about there? He could be talking about what Mickey Jennifer was saying. A big name gamer was killed in a car crash recently and they streamed his funeral on his channel. Yeah, I'm not sure I would do that. But I would definitely put videos up from beyond the grave if I knew I was going to die. It's controversial, I think it's cool, but some people think it lacks taste, referring to the streaming the funeral. Well, it depends how close a bond you've built with your audience. If those people to you feel like part of your family and you want to involve them in you heading to your final resting place, then there's nothing wrong with that. It's a personal decision. There are some people that stream their weddings live on the internet and so on. It depends how close you feel to the people out there, or whether you just enjoy the attention. Now let's see. Apparently Bazooka did actually eat it to find out. Yes, I wouldn't play the old is it a piece of dirt or is it food game by eating something. I would generally like to have that information in my arsenal before I actually go to war on it. Let's see. Anyone else got any thoughts on this? Because I do think that, especially if you are running some kind of fundraising, or if you've been selling merch, and people have given you their hard-earned cash, and they've invested an awful lot of their time into watching your content, you should at the very least, if you find yourself being away for a long time, let them know. Look guys, this is taking longer than I thought, but I may be back, I may not be. Just letting you know I'm still alive. Would that be so hard for someone to do? Especially in this day and age where you can just whip out your phone and record video that way and instantly upload it to YouTube. You don't need to do any video editing. Even just doing a live hangout on your phone for 2 minutes. It's incredibly easy to put videos on YouTube now. It's never been easier. So I don't really think there is much of an excuse. If you're in perfectly good health and you don't have some other horrific thing going on, if suddenly your whole family die in a plane crash and you're the only one left and you're just deeply traumatized, I can understand disappearing for a while. So under those circumstances, I think you'd have to let someone off if they don't feel like interacting with anyone for quite a significant length of time. But usually, I think people don't have those kind of reasons for vanishing. I think quite often people either just don't care about the audience, or they just have other priorities that they place above that relationship they've built with their audience. And for people like me who take that audience relationship quite seriously, it can be somewhat frustrating to see other channels kind of toying with the emotions of their audience, if you will, and to see the audience remain loyal to them. It's like looking at a kind of a beaten and abused dog kind of wagging its tail and being excited to see its owner, even though it's mistreated it. That's kind of how I feel when I see those kind of situations. So maybe you think I'm being a bit overdramatic here, but thankfully there aren't too many channels where I've had those thoughts on. One or two definitely, but certainly not been many in the old wargaming community. There have been some that have disappeared in the wargaming community, some of which I know reasons for, and some of which are legally questionable in their disappearance. Let's see. Graham Collin doesn't have one of those newfangled smartphone thingies. Yes, well, Graham Collin, you are a man of a certain age, and some people, it takes a while for technology to be fully ingrained in their routine, as it were. And some people decide, well, I'm old already, so by the time I get my head around it, I'll be too old to even use it, so why bother? I'll just continue to travel around in my horse-drawn cart. I don't think Graham Collin's quite that old, though. Just old by wargaming community YouTube standards, I would say, because wargaming in general, if you include historical, there are quite a few ancients out there, and I'm not just talking about the 6 mil ancients on the table, I'm talking about the 6 foot ancients pushing them around as well. So it's mainly on YouTube, you possibly get the impression that wargaming is a very youth-oriented hobby, looking at the kind of people we have, such as the face of youth right here, which is me, fresh-faced youngster, full of life, sprightly, muscular. Yeah. Graham is apparently 51. So, ooh, yes, he's certainly getting up there. Quite advanced in years, I would say. Let's see. Time for a tactical mic switch again. Is it doing it again? Well, hopefully this won't be an issue because I'll be on my real computer, hopefully, by the next live show, with any luck. And if I'm not, hopefully I'll have got rid of this issue. Hopefully it hasn't hindered anyone in their enjoyment of the show this evening. And I think we're shortly going to wrap this one up at around about 1 hour as well, because there are things that I should probably be doing, such as trying to fix the computer, although it is looking very, very likely that the power supply is completely gone and I'll have to get a replacement part. But of course, the tech support chat online thingy that they have, the particular online store that I bought that from, their chat operates between 9:30 AM and 4 PM, and of course it didn't die until after 4 PM, so I wasn't able to do that tonight, so I'm going to be on that like a shot tomorrow, I think, and try and get that sorted out. Let's see, so apparently the microphone is just quite staticky now. Very, very strange. Maybe it's because I've been switching microphones around while inside the Hangout, rather than switching to the microphone I wanted to use from the start. Then I had to adjust the levels and such. So that could have been messing with things early on. Could have destroyed everything. I think my intro was quite spectacular as well this week and no one heard it, sadly. Maybe if they turn the volume all the way up and then they would just get deafened after about 3 minutes into the video. So hopefully everyone was able to enjoy this. Oh, switching the mic apparently fixed it. Okay, so before we go, I'm just going to have a quick look at the old spot where I asked for some questions to come in the Andy2D6 Orange Wargaming Facebook group, which is linked in the description, and I would encourage everyone to go and join and keep up to date with all the latest goings on this channel. And you can submit anything that you would like to be a discussion topic. You can suggest guests or anything for this show. I haven't had a guest for a couple of weeks, actually. May try and line one up for next week, just to keep things extra spicy. So, we did have some questions, actually, yesterday. So, Mickey Jen wanted to know, why is the rum always gone? I would suggest because someone has drunk it, would be my best guess. Or perhaps, if it's in a barrel, then maybe someone's drilled a hole into the bottom of the barrel and it's slowly leaking out to kind of leave a trail. For the criminals who have stolen all the rum can then be followed. So when they get to the hideout, they'll notice it's empty, and they'll perhaps realize that there's a trail leading all the way back to the scene of the crime, which the detectives have got some kind of hound sniffing along the pavement towards their hideout. Let's see. Mickey Jenver again. Do I have any plans to use the awesome Magnus the Red model in any of your games? I think it's flexible enough to use in places other than 40k. Well, it's a very nice model. I don't think I particularly have a use for it. I don't think I really need a Demon Prince, particularly a Zench one. The only Chaos army I have is my Slanesh army for 40k, the Crab Marines, and I'm not sure he would look that great in that army. He's not quite crabby enough. And then I already answered the old question on the Blood Bowl. So I think those are the only questions. I did ask quite late in the day if anyone had anything to submit. Let's see. Were there any others? Or were there any I didn't get to? No, I think that's it for now. So I'm going to say that if anyone has any questions for next week, then they can drop them anywhere in the old Facebook group, preferably on the post specific to this group, specific to this show, should I say, which is the one with, of course, the Sisters of Battle with my head strategically photoshopped on there, and a couple of people I've just approved to join that group right now. So if anyone's got anything to ask or comment on this week's show, they can do so in there if they don't feel like commenting on YouTube, which some people don't, especially because YouTube, annoyingly now, makes you wait about 15 minutes until the show's over before you can leave a permanent comment, which is really, really irritating, actually, because I would like people to be able to, as soon as the show's over, just instantly refresh the page and leave a permanent comment, because it makes the show and the video in general look much more active, so people are likely to watch the whole thing all the way through. If you click on a video and it's got no comments on it, then it kind of makes you think, well, no one was particularly engaged by this, so I'm not going to bother. I'm not even going to give it the time of day. And that's the reason I would also encourage people to like videos as well, particularly mine, but any videos in the wargaming community. Likes do help. Dislikes do help as well, oddly enough. Until you get to a certain level, any kind of like or dislike is just considered successful engagement of the audience. So once you get really high up in the percentage of dislikes, when dislikes outnumber likes by some ridiculous margin, then I think it does actually push you down the search results. But until then, if you only have a small amount of dislikes, it actually helps you, I think. They might have changed that, but that's the last I heard. Let's see. I could crab Magnus up a bit, according to Sebastian Blau. I could, in theory, but I think that would be a waste of money because he's going to be ridiculously expensive, I imagine. He's probably going to be, what, £75 maybe? Something obscene like that. So I think I'd be better off getting some real crab and making my own kind of crabby demon prince with it. I've actually been looking at some options for that crab army, because I did play a game of 40k the other day. I was actually working on the battle report when the old PC decided it wasn't going to work anymore. So that file is just chilling on there now, waiting for me to be able to use the PC before I can continue with the editing process. But anytime I play a game, I usually get a bit inspired to purchase or paint something for that particular system. So I thought, well, I had quite a fun game of 40k, so I'll have a look into what I could add to my crab army. And I was looking at a few different things. I was looking at some kind of BattleTech style models, because there are some big crab mechs that are kind of probably the right size to be kind of Chaos Terminators, which have big crab hands, which I think would be quite cool because they're obviously really armored with them being big stompy robots. So that would be cool. And of course, I'm still waiting on my Pincer Demon from Creature Caster, and I did actually hear the other day that there was some progress on that Kickstarter. That's another thing I want to talk about at some point, not tonight probably, but in the future I want to talk about Kickstarters that were considerably delayed and the reasons behind it, because there have been quite a few. Let's see. Mickey Jenber, did we ever find out why Rem can't play so much, or was The Rock the correct answer? Well, he can play so much, he just can't travel as much, is the thing. And it takes at least 2 or 3 hours for him to travel up here. So it's the travel time that's the issue. So even if you threw a huge amount of money at him through Patreon to cover the travel cost, it would still be the time commitment would be a bit much to be made on a regular basis. So there will still be battle reports, but they just won't be as frequent probably. And of course you do get other content. You even get other Age of Sigmar battle reports on my channel that aren't just Rem related as well. So it shouldn't affect too much, hopefully, on the old channel. And of course you'll still get all the Kings of War 40k stuff, Dead Zone as well, hopefully. You know what I'm thinking for Dead Zone? I'm thinking what would be great would be a nice piece of wood with the board on it, and then underneath some kind of turntable so you can spin it round, and then I could just have the camera on a tripod pointing at the table and then just rotate the actual table itself. What do you think about that one? I think that would be a really good idea. I'd have to look into it. So apparently people have been pretty much confirming that Remington Steele has a rock as a girlfriend now, a pet rock, which he has entered into an intimate relationship with. Stu Gibson says, I need to get down to Manchester for a game at some point. Yes, I would think you probably do. Let's see, anybody else got any interesting comments here before we take this one off the air? I think we're about 1 hour, 5 minutes in, which is a bit more than I thought I would get through tonight, since I wasn't really able to prepare too much with the old technical gremlin grappling that was going on beforehand. Mickey Jenver overloading his car with groupies, rock groupies. Yeah, rock and roll groupies, not just rocks. Let's see. Got caught driving under the influence and lost his license for a year. Graham Collin suggesting that might be a reason. No, I don't think that's it. Let's see. Anything else we want to read out here? Hope the audio is still all right, by the way. Let's see. Right before the show, I actually whizzed around changing all the USB sockets, because on the back of this PC, which is the old PC, it doesn't really clearly mark which of the USB are. I think it's some of the USB 2 and some are USB 3, some complicated nonsense like that. And some of the devices don't work in certain slots. So on the back of the other PC, they're nicely labeled, but on this one, they're not. So I was constantly switching them around, trying to get each device to work. And I think I just about pulled it off in the end. So it's been just about managed to get it together in time to get this show out. So this is some hardcore commitment here, because I've been feverishly running around like some kind of rampaging, PC repairing, tinkering beast in the couple of hours leading up to this show. So if you ever questioned my commitment to my audience and to the reliability of my show schedule, you will no longer have any doubts whatsoever. Okay, I think it's time to wrap this one up. So let's look at this wonderful image, shall we? And all that remains to be said is good night out there, whatever you are.